Hello, YouTube. I forgot to turn my face on. Sorry about that. I am in my tent. It is Thanksgiving. I have, let's see, less than 40, 33% battery. I am gonna need to get out and find some place to charge my phone today. There are places that are open. I could go hang out at the bar called The Barn after 4 p.m. I know they'll be open. I don't know if they'll have an outlet I can charge my phone at, though. Irrelevant. I would like to begin this with a thank you to Mary Mars on Cash App. Sent me $50 today. So happy Thanksgiving and thank you very much for that. I don't know how to express gratitude very well because I've never received gifts. You don't understand what it's like to be the adult child of parents who hated you. I've lived in soul-crushing abuse for so long that taking the mask of the laughing Buddha off to show you that you've affected me deeply with your kindness and such a huge amount of money when I was not asking for this much. Thank you very much. I began recording today because I want to share with you what it's like to spend time with me just doing what I do, being who I am. I'm having a good day. I'm just hanging out in my tent, watching my battery go down, trying to make a little bit of money on the Misplay app, and watching. Well, I watched yesterday's Rich Eisen, and now I'm listening to the Neebs cast, the most recent episode, and I just want to share with you. I want to share with you that I am this intense. I'm this guy at all times, and I want to I want to share something with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
nice. Mm-hmm. It's pay homage to the classics.
And I didn't
So
even
they're
like
talking
that when I was a
about
kid.
the
I didn't like
DC,
that show.
What about Danny DeVito's Penguin?
WE.
No, that was fucking so weird.
That was some weird
Yeah.
shit.
Batman.
Giant penguins and such.
Yeah.
His parents, who was, I
TV
believe,
shows.
Pee Wee Herman, threw him over a bridge as a baby, and he floated into the underground
Now they're
of a
talking
zoo
about that
where
movie
penguins
that I haven't
raised him.
watched.
It's my favorite way to become a supervillain.
And I'm just kind of passively listening. But then the favorite way to become a
Made all the
supervillain
sense.
joke.
Oh,
I keyed in on that.
And then he comes out and becomes mayor.
Those meetings of, because there's so many of them, like
Neebs
Jamie
here.
Foxx and
I keyed in on
that
this.
one Spider-Man
Oh,
movie,
God, yeah, where he just falls into an electric vat of eels.
and then who else? I mean, Jack Nicholson.
I mean, his Joker, yeah,
He fell into a vat of something.
just
It was a common trope.
Yeah,
yeah. But
Yeah.
that world, it kind of worked in that.
It does, because, I mean,
Like that world is very different.
is stylized.
Exactly.
Yeah, it was more
comic book.
cartoony.
Yeah, very.
exactly.
Yeah.
It
Well,
does work.
yeah.
but I just wonder in the comic book writing meetings, like how many
Hear
people
this.
can we throw into a liquid?
The comic book writing meetings. How many people can we throw into a liquid? And then as they continue out this conversation, and we're going to listen to it together, but I'm not going to get the timing of when I said it right. And what I want to get to what I wanted to share with you. I'm going, okay, yeah, guys. That's, think about comic books in my mind. I'm going, think about what comic books were like in the 50s and 60s. Think about when they were being written, right? The 30s, the 40s, the 20s. Like Superman's like super early in American and 20th century history, what we think of as American history, because we're not really taught American history. My European friends don't know this about Americans. We're not taught American history between 1776 and 1950. We're just not taught that history. I've spent the last 4 years living with an American history master's. She has an American history master's. And she thinks that everyone is taught all of the things that she was taught about the 19th and 20th centuries. And we're not. We're taught that the Revolutionary War happened. They don't mention the War of 1812 because I know they didn't mention the War of 1812 because when I was a kid and they had just taught us about how 1776 ended, I used to play a fuckload of military strategy games. My dad was in the army, so they were around. I had them. I used to play the fuck out of like Command and Conquer. We had not Civilization, but games like Civilization. So like the one that I really gravitated toward while I was thinking about this was called Cyberstorm. It was really good. I used to play a lot of Sierra strategy games. In fact, I used to play the Sierra strategy games, Civil War 1 and 2. So anyway, I know that we weren't taught it because I was keyed in school when we should have been taught it. And I asked her in my late 30s how we came to the conclusion that Washington, D.C. was safe from foreign invasion when it's on a river. And rivers are how militaries navigated the world in the 18th century. And she goes, oh, it wasn't. The War of 1812. Don't you know about the War of 1812? They rowed boats right up there and burned down the Capitol. And I was like, no, I did not know that, because no, they did not teach us this in school. They teach us that the Civil War happened, and they tell you what you need to know. The Civil War happened over slaves, but they don't teach you any of the context that will make you understand why it was about slaves ultimately, and that you can just leave it at that, because it was about a lot of minutia. And so a lot of people came out of high school and university educations in the United States thinking that it was actually about states' rights, and that states have rights. They don't have rights because of the Civil War. They just don't. And so anyway, these guys are from North Carolina. Most of them are from North Carolina. Neebs, the one who's talking, Apsro, the one who brought up the conversation, they're from North Carolina. They have the same education that I do. In fact, they grew up in the same parts of the state that I got my education from and all of this stuff. And so here's what I think is very funny. I said out loud, because I'm in a tent by myself in the woods. I said out loud, you guys are not remembering history very well. You're not even remembering the 1970s very well. You're not doing very good exegesis. Which is a nerdy and ridiculous thing to say on a gaming podcast. Of course they're not doing good exegesis. They don't know that word exists. I said that to myself because I feel like I need to practice using that word. Not just using that word, but reminding myself of what that word is. And it's remembering anything that you're talking about. It's specifically about reading, but it's you take any passage that you're reading and you contextualize it historically as accurately as possible, as far back as possible. If you check out my Patreon, I put the rules, I have a 3-step guide for how to learn any decade in history, any decade, any half century, or any full century. There's a 3-step process, and I'll tell it to you here right now. I'll give it to you for free. 3-step process. You can't see my hands. 3-step process. Oh, my battery is going to die because I've chosen to do this, so I need to hurry. 3-step process, and this can just be about exegesis and how they're not doing exegesis. They're not doing good exegesis, and I made a mistake. So what you do is you learn as much about that period's art. It's oh, I just let my phone go to sleep. Oh, thank goodness. You learn as much about that time period's art, its popular culture, its literature, and its counter-cultural history. It's counter-culture. It's alternate historical claims. Not what is being made in the public view, not what everybody believes, but what a minority believes. You look at what the minority believe in any decade, half century, or full century, and now you're starting to understand that century. And if you really want to understand, that period, if you really want to understand that period, you do that exact same process for the decade, half century, or full century before it. And then if you really, really want to understand the century that you started at, or the time period that you began at, you go back to the period before that, and then you just repeat that process forever. And then you take everything that you've learned about all of the periods before that, and you just add them up in a straight line to what you've got and what you're examining in the period that you actually want to think about. The reason you don't understand history, and the reason you're not taught history, the reason that no one book of history is very adequate anymore, is because no historian can do that. that 3-step process that I gave you. Do you want to know why no historian can do that? It will drive you insane. It will make you think that living in a tent so you can read these books that you need to understand to contextualize the periods of history that you want to understand, so you can teach and you can speak and you can give hope to people who are desperate for hope right now. Liberals are desperate for hope. There may never be another Democrat president in the United States after the debacle that the Democrats just gave us over the last 20-year period. Their party might splinter and fracture and dissolve. Finally, after something like 270 years of outright evil, it might finally happen. And it's hilarious that it was Trump who killed them, because Trump was a lifelong Democrat. Okay, so they're talking about superheroes and how DC has a trope. DC has a way of making superheroes, but what they're not doing is good exegesis. They're not thinking about when these superheroes were initially created. And so hear what they're going to say. It's very funny, and this is a promo for Neebs. Neebs, guys, if this gets back around to you, I hope you know that I love you. I really do.
Yeah.
That ends up a super villain, or
It does seem like the most generic thing. It's like, oh, this bunch of chemicals fell on him. He's a villain now.
what do you think the best one is?
Okay, but wait,
Is it-
But think about this. Superhero, these comic books were made in the periods I told you, something like from the 20s up, right? And think about who they were made for. They were explicitly for children before the 90s. Comic book, see, that's something that they're not doing as good exegesis, is because they grew up and they were introduced to comic books in the 90s. So they don't know that comic books were explicitly for grade school children. They were explicitly a tool to increase literacy in grade schools among boys, because boys were failing out of literacy back then too. Boys have never had an interest in literacy. This is why you have to hit them in order to get them to be good students. I'm not joking. It's very funny, but I'm not joking. And so anyway, falling in a vat of liquid or having a job accident, think about it. Even in the 1970s, even in the 1980s, we didn't have the workplace safety regulations in place to keep people from doing these things. As a kid, in the industrial periods between the 1920s and the 1990s, you knew a lot of people who'd had industrial accidents. I grew up in machining. I knew many people who were missing fingers. Just as a kid, I knew many people who were missing fingers. My granddad used to explicitly tell me stories every weekend, because I worked on my dad's machines during the week, about stories of people losing limbs, dying in machines in the 70s and the 80s. So yeah, you got to remember what these supervillains, who they're mad at back in the day. You got to remember why they have pathos today. They were angry at mega corporations for not having safety regulations, guys. They're doing bad exegesis because they don't know the history, because they're artists, and artists think they can be storytellers without actually knowing the history of the world around them today, which is nonsense. And you need to understand that that's a big part of the shaggy part of the Philaletheia that I'm doing. I'm teaching you how to be a good storyteller and how to listen for story, and that the myth and the legend and the backstory are actually more important than the scientific history. Putting everything in order, in the proper order, and knowing exactly what happened is interesting. But something that even historians forget is that history isn't actually written by the victors. It's dictated by the victors. That's a different thing. We won. We beat the corporations in the 90s, and we got safety regs. We beat the corporations in the aughts, and we got health care. We can beat the corporations in the 2020s and the 2030s too. Our U.S. government just forced Google to sell Chrome for the exact same reason that Microsoft had to stop auto-installing Internet Explorer on every Windows computer. We can beat the corporations if we keep electing the GOP. It's very funny, actually. I'm in conversations about how the GOP are evil, actually, and it's like, well, the GOP of the 80s and the 90s were evil because they saw how good the Democrats were living and they wanted a piece of that pie. Well, who doesn't want a piece of that pie today? That's why you have a blue check mark. That's why you want to be stingy with likes and donations to me, tips to me, right? Because we all think that living like the corporate tycoons is the way to live. These guys have become corporate tycoons. I love you, Neebs guys, but because of the influence of Thick 44, who was a corporate tycoon, and educated and trained to be a corporate tycoon, they live like corporate tycoons, and so they don't need to know the history. Why do they not need to know the history? Because they're winning already, and good for them. I love that they're winning, but the reason that Thick and I used to argue is over his corporate tycoon shit. He and I used to argue in these Neebs casts. He didn't argue back, but I used to get at him in the comments.
Get bit by a spider.
No, let's turn into a superhero. Okay. Like, yeah, what is the best? Like, he became a villain because of this.
Struck by lightning from a different planet.
Trying to
These
think
are-
of all the villains.
That's assuming that they've been given a power.
Yeah, I feel like
as a
all
villain.
of Spider-Man villains are lab
guess they
experiment
are.
goes wrong.
Okay.
Right.
Like Green Goblin, lab experiment goes wrong. Doctor Octopus, lab
Think about the
experiment goes
1960s
wrong.
and 70s.
Jamie Foxx, the lab experiment goes wrong. The Lizard, lab experiment goes wrong.
Think about what you know about that show, Stranger Things. Stranger Things is a one-to-one ripoff of the Montauk Project, which is about this. It's about military experiments going very wrong and using children. That was the 70s, and that was the 80s. That was very recent in American history, folks. World history. Russia and China still do this shit. They still experiment on their people. They still make supervillains. COVID, folks, was 4 years ago. I'm not even being conspiratorial. It was made in a fucking Chinese lab. A Chinese lab that had safety leaks. Constant safety leaks. Why? Because communist nations aren't the United States. It's that obvious. They still make supervillains. And so I'm inviting you into my life. This is what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how can I teach you all of these things? And so I turn off my brain and I listen to these guys, and then I end up wanting to shout at them because they're 10 years older than I am. I want to shout at them that they should know this, but they don't need to. And they're successful because they don't. You understand that they're successful because they don't. All right, I love you. That's what I wanted to share with you. Now let's see if I can turn this off. I am Shaggy. I am Philalitea. For those of you who are new to the channel and you made it 18 minutes, that's fucking awesome of you. Philalitea is a Greek word. I thought I invented it because I thought I was being clever for my narrative work with Robert Longshore. And so it's just what I called him. But it turns out it's what the gospel writers, the actual authors, and the first community of Christians called themselves. It means lovers of truth. Philalitea. Aletheia is a goddess. She is a goddess. She pre-existed my inventing her. She pre-existed these early Christians. She means truth, and she's who Plato is talking about when he's talking about the separation of the Mouton from the Aletheia. Theia is a kind of goddess in its own right. Think of Theoi, Thea, Theia. And so it's truth, and it's higher than wisdom. And so I'm just speaking truths. I don't need you. Wisdom is basically a sort of common sense. It's what the old people will let me say. Well, I don't need to say what the old people will let me say because the old people are trying to kill us all so they can continue to live in robot bodies. Do you not understand this? You don't get to get in a robot body. The old people get in the robot bodies first. Watch that movie Don't Look Up on Netflix. That's maybe the best movie that was made in the last 10 years as far as social commentary. I know it's making fun of COVID, but really, just watch it. It's what you're acting like. It's what all of you are acting like. I'm in this tent because I keep looking up. And I keep realizing that there's an infinite expanse of things that I don't know, and I have a very short amount of life to live. And so really, I've put myself at an impasse. I've put myself at a crossroads. A lot of you don't seem to understand exactly why I'm homeless. I'm homeless because of domestic abuse. I'm homeless because of judicial corruption. But I have chosen to live in a tent and not pursue the entitlements that are available to me. A, because I'm too smart. I'm too smart to put myself there. I'll know what's going on and I will suffer more than I need to. And B, because I'm either going to do something with what I know or I'm going to fucking die this winter. That's what it's about. None of you wants to hear that. I'm either going to use this stuff that I've learned to make your life manageable, or I'm going to fucking die because I can't handle watching you all struggle. I can't fucking take it. And that's real. That's been my whole life. I never deserved any of the beatings or the sexual abuses that I suffered. But neither did you deserve to not understand why the world is the way it is and why you can't seem to get out of your rung of the social ladder. Why can't you seem to climb? It's because you don't know your history. It's because you don't know where you've come from. You don't know where you're going. And until you know where you've come from, you can't know where you're going. Destiny is not where you're headed. Destiny is where you've been. Destiny is the inverse of destination. Destination is where you're going. Destiny is where you've been. You can't know how you'll die until you know how you've lived. It's just a fact. Well, I've lived cold and alone and hurting in my heart for other people who seem to have it all together. But just don't. Just don't know what they're doing wrong. Don't love their lives. Don't love their spouses. Don't love their children. Don't love their jobs. Why? Why can't you love when it's so easy for me? And it makes me suffer. And so I wanted to share something with you that brings me great joy. Seeing my idiosyncrasies. I see that I'm weird and I'm different. I know it. But it's also kind of funny because you can learn a lot by just paying attention to the exegesis of superhero comics. The movies are the way they are now because everything's already been done in the comic books. Star Wars fans, these guys bitch about Star Wars all the time. Star Wars is the way it is now because everything was already done in the novels and the comic books. They have to go to an infinitely distant past. And that was the point with Star Wars in the first place. Buck Rogers already happened. Star Wars was already made. George Lucas just wanted to make Buck Rogers. And so what he did was Buck Rogers was in the infinite future, so he just stuck it in the infinite past. But every time they try to bring Star Wars into the present, closer and closer to us, the less we like it. Why? Because all of that's already been done. We've already seen all of that. The more technology you add on top of this medieval lightsaber intergalactic romance, the more you just make it cyberpunk. But we have cyberpunk. We have Blade Runner. We have other... Star Wars is Star Wars. And it doesn't escape my notice that I do look a little bit like Obi-Wan, my favorite character right now. I just want you guys to know that it's Thanksgiving. I love you. And I wanted to communicate with you in long form, the way I used to. This is what the work in my heart is sharing with you the things that I watch, the things that I read, and how I pull truth, wisdom, knowledge, growth, how I challenge myself with what I know, how I test myself. And how I can be so confident that I do know what I know and that I'm right. And that you can do it too. I'm not like some generationally gifted super Christ. Frankly, if you were born after World War II, you underwent all of the social engineering that I did. So it's not uninteresting why we're different. Because you went under the same social engineering I did. So why are we so different? I ask that all the time, and people think I'm being an asshole. They think I'm being critical, mean. Like I asked on Twitter last week. Like you're happy with only producing 1,000 words a day? Like that's a lot to you? I accidentally produced 15,000 words in a night into a word processor. I write by hand, so I slow down. So I don't produce so much. Because you won't read it. And a publisher won't. You don't understand. If you won't read it, a publisher won't publish it. If I can't get it directly into the hands of people I know and show it to a publisher, like, look, these are people who have read it and have bought it. They won't. My work is not books. I can't write books, but I could write a book-length anthology of my writings, like any philosopher. That's what the Gospels are. That's what the Bible is. I'm in that tradition, and you can't understand that because you don't engage in that tradition. And I get why. I get why. That tradition is a nest of vipers. I get it. I didn't either until I moved into the tent. And I think it saved my life. I believe that. I believe if I didn't find pathos and company in men like Ezekiel and Jonah and Isaiah and Jesus and Judas and there's a name I'm reaching for that I can't remember, I'd be lost. I'm not suggesting you do that, though. That's what you don't understand. I'm suggesting that you find pathos in me. A friend, according to Aristotle, okay? A friend, and the word philo, it means lover, love, but it properly translates as friend. A friend is someone that you love as yourself, as a second self, someone whose life and whose continued existence and whose prosperity and whose thrivation is more important to you than your own. I would like to make friends out of this. People who care about me more than I do so I can be reckless, but who trust me not to become a supervillain. Thank you for watching. I am Shaggy. I am Philalitea. Happy Thanksgiving. Do know that even when I lash out, it's because I love you. Another homeless talked to me yesterday. He's not homeless. Another desperately poor man talked to me yesterday in the library, and I should tell this story. He and I have spoken briefly while we filled our coffee at Christ's table. And I've gotten to know him very well. Because desperate people want to talk, because desperate people want to know that they're alive. And if somebody responds that they have to be alive because ghosts, nobody talks back to a ghost. I almost made myself cry thinking about my week spent in the psych ward. I had a couple of ghosts fall in love with me. because I was worse than they were, and they saw that, and that made me, wow. I think a lot of people think this is my rock bottom. Being loved by a ghost in a mental hospital that won't help you. And the woman that you know is going home is going to try to kill you that was rock bottom. This is the best my life has ever been. And so he was a Carnival. He's been touring with Carnival is how he spent his summer. Because he needed to make money. And so that's what I know about him. And he moved back in with his mom. His mom let him move back in with her, and he's doing okay. He's trying to find work, and he's at least able to afford his booze because he's always sauced. And so he was explaining to me that he used to be a junkie, and it was bad. Bad. Like row house, always fucked up, stealing. He explained to me that he went to rehab, and he got clean, and in rehab they asked him a question that changed his life. And they said, are the things that you do with your life, the way you spend your time, are they for you? Are they you and your heart telling you what you want to be doing? Or are they the drug, telling you what you need to do to get the drug, so you don't have to listen to that voice on the inside? And he said that totally changed his life. He got clean that moment. Boom, clean. 90 days, they let him out, done. Never had to think about it ever again. Still doesn't think about it now. And now, obviously, alcohol is a demon that lives on his back. But like me with weed, it's not the drug. It's the ability to provide it. It's the ability to get it. It's the ability to be worth people investing in you, knowing that it makes you better in some way. And it does. I was content to be quiet all day, and then I got a little stoned, and now look at me. And now look at me, though. Look at me, though. Do it. I'm okay. I'm cold, but I've got this hot hands here on my balls, and my feet are fine. My hands are a little cold, but I've got my gloves. And I've got good gloves that I'll put under these that have fingers in them. And I've got leather gloves that I can put over top of those if I'm just desperate. But it's not going to get that cold. And I've been praying, and whether I believe that prayers are answered or that he would answer mine, the other day I told you it was supposed to be 17. Now it's predicting 22. I have been praying for just not that. Not the teens. Come on. Have some mercy, God. I'm out in this. And I've been asking you guys to pray for me, and I know Bobby's praying. I don't know that Bobby watches these, but I know Bobby reads on Patreon. And so what I've noticed about what I write and what I make is that I'm talking to specific people sometimes. They may not know it, but sometimes I'm talking to very specific people. I've been writing to Bobby a lot in my journals because Bobby's reading. And so I can do that for you too. I mean, a lot of these videos can just be for you, about you even. I mean, Walter noticed that. I made a video about him, and we talked about it. And we don't have to agree, but we also don't have to agree to disagree. What we can do is agree not to get in one another's way. I don't want to stop him from doing anything, but I'm allowed to be worried about his brain fog is going to make him do something that's going to hurt himself. But if he doesn't want my concern, he doesn't need my concern, because the thing that Europeans, especially Europeans in formerly communist countries, or he's in Switzerland, but Swiss don't understand this, is that you don't have to take the safety regs to the far extreme of forcing people to follow them when they're not employees. That's the thing you don't understand. OSHA is about, I don't know what that stands for, but it's our safety association or whatever. It's the people who will fuck you up if you're an employer who's not providing the necessary safety equipment. But they also will fuck you up as an employee if you're not using the necessary safety equipment. Like, what you don't understand is that your life remains in your hands in a dangerous environment. Still your responsibility not to get dead. I think Europeans think that in the United States we have this extreme situation where even staying alive in the workplace is the employer's responsibility, like it would be and is in communism. And no, it's your responsibility not to die. The employer is only at fault if they didn't provide. And so if you die in the workplace and you didn't have life insurance, your family can't sue if the necessary safety equipment was there and you weren't using it. It's not the 1990s anymore, guys. We're not that hyper litigious anymore. We were that hyper litigious because we weren't allowed to sue before then. We got all those lawyers because, frankly, Jews got sick of watching people like me. They in exactly the same way I'm behaving, they got sick of seeing people suffer. So they became lawyers. And then poor people went, "Oh, fuck, it's that easy?" And then anti-Semitism happened. But that's your workplace safety turning you into a supervillain. But there are workplace safety superheroes too. Think of all the people like Spider-Man. Like, think about how Sam Raimi handled Spider-Man, right? He becomes what he is because of a frankly unsafe and an unsafe handling of a radioactive spider in a public environment. That's something that can happen. It happened with COVID. So think about whether COVID actually do this. Think about whether the trauma of the COVID year has turned you into a superhero or a supervillain. It turned me into a superhero, if you think about it. Because I really threw myself at being a writer and a podcaster in 2020. I was doing it. I've been doing it since 2015. But I really threw myself at being successful in 2020 because I needed it. That's something that I don't think people realize. Is that these people like Thick, these people like Y-Files, who clearly had good jobs before they became YouTubers, like Rogan, or I wish I could pull. I didn't plan to talk about these people. The one that really turned me on was Astonishing Legends. And both of them were established with independent wealth. That's how they were able to be polished and quality enough. They didn't need it. They just didn't want what they had. Well, I need this. And so I would just like to thank everybody this last month of November who's donated for my cause. Because the cause right now has been keeping warm socks on my feet, the water out of my tent, and my Panera subscription. And then I also overate because people gave me money specifically for food, and that's important to me to spend it on what it's given to me for. So I don't save that money. I live like a non-profit organization because it's important to me. Every dollar that I save and spend on something other than prolonging my life or what I need to feel like I can podcast, that means weed, is sin money, in my opinion. And you need to hear this from me. You need to hear it out of my mouth. I've been holding this back until I started getting donations. So I got 50 today, and today's the day. Thanksgiving is not a day of confession, but today it is. If you've invited me into your home, this is how I behave. I confess. So thank you. Thank you for inviting me into your home. Thank you for inviting me into your mind. Thank you for donating, because a lot of you have donated. A lot more than last month. Last month I was supported by Def Drock, I think is what he calls himself on Twitter. I'm not going to. And Magic Shadow has supported me for 6 months. But there were a lot of other people this month, so thank you. It means the difference between life and death. It means the difference between wanting to keep living and giving up. And giving up for me means surrendering myself to the Salvation Army and letting them put me in Section 8 housing and just living in Zanesville until I die. Because I don't think you understand. I gave my youth and I gave my 20s to the American economy, the GDP. And I don't believe in the way things are run. My skill sets are in leadership and training and coaching and management, hospitality and service. Those are my skills. That's my training. That's my education. I was educated. Sent to seminars and training classes, week long. I went to a week-long management course through Sonic, the corporation Sonic. And I just don't believe in the way things are. I just do not believe in this last gasp affirmative action that's going on at the actual hiring manager level of corporate stores. They have no control over that. I just don't believe in the way human resources handles themselves. I don't believe in the way that management carries themselves in this country. Conscientious objection to working in the industry for which I'm trained. And you have to understand, I'm very much, this is, those of you who knew me before may recognize this idiom, but I'm very much the warrior showing up to battle with no weapons. There's another way to handle this. And it's not the way we've done it for the last 100 years. So I'm on the internet. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Patreon. I'm on YouTube. And I'm kind of rambling because I'm a little stoned and I'm feeling good and it's Thanksgiving and everybody else gets to do this. That's the thing, is when you show me other people what they make, my stuff is better. I'm a better argumenter. I'm a better speaker. I'm better looking. I have better topics. Even when I take on their topics, I'm better. So I don't understand. I don't. I do. It's that I'm better. It's that it's hard to believe that I'm not successful at something else. It's hard to believe that I really am homeless. It's hard to believe that I don't have millions that I'm sitting on. It's hard to believe that I'm not like every other influencer. And that just takes time, and it takes exposure, and I've tried to give you that time. Frankly, that's why I haven't done anything with talking to the future. I got it all the way I wanted it, and then I was good to let it go because you didn't want it. And that's something I've been talking with people. People don't understand how manufacturing actually works. They think that you make 1 billion shoes and then you try to sell them, and that's not how that works. You make one shoe, you sell it, and then you take commissions, and then you make only the number of shoes that you've already sold. Nike's not making all of those shoes and then going around door to door selling them. That's why nobody does that anymore. The door-to-door vacuum sales, those don't happen anymore. Why don't they happen anymore? Because warehouses aren't full like that. Why? Because the economy isn't bullish like that. Why? Because everything's monopolized. You don't have small businesses trying to compete with major corporations anymore. You just don't. Well, I mean, you do. They're competing for ad revenue. I'm competing with major corporations like Wi-Files over ad revenue, like Neebs Gaming over ad revenue, like that Dark Brandon that I commented on, or that, what's he call himself? Skeptic Dickface? Whatever. These people. I'm competing with the Daily Wire as a major corporation. I don't understand why the anarcho-capitalists... I could effectively describe me as an anarcho-capitalist, extremist. I don't understand why all of the anarcho-capitalists of Twitter and YouTube don't understand that as soon as somebody starts to make a profit and be able to take vacations off their donations, they're a major corporation now. I love you guys, but you're dumb as fuck. Wi-Files is a major corporation. Neebs is a major corporation. As soon as you can start selling merch, you're competing with Tide. Like, you're competing with Walmart at that stage. And when you're big enough to compete in distribution with Anheuser-Busch, you're a major business. You're not a small business anymore. Small businesses run out of one town. As soon as you have a franchise, as soon as you have 2 installations, as soon as you're going to cons, you're a major business. You're successful. I'm not that. I've never been that. I've refused to be that because I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I've thought this whole time that everything was going to collapse and I was going to need to live in a tent. So I spent my time preparing myself to meet God young. So here I am. I can show you so many things. I could teach you so much. I'm going to call you stupid a lot. Like, just be prepared for that. My love language is abuse because I grew up in abuse. You're just going to have to deal with that. There have been a lot of people who couldn't, and I get that. But I'm going to call you names like stupid and dumbass. Why? Because they're affectionate. Because you need to be acclimated to thinking those things about yourself. You need to be a little bit less sensitive to things that don't matter. If you're still alive, it doesn't matter whether you're stupid. You're still alive. You got to really think about that. You don't have to, because you only engage at the corporate level and you get to choose what you look at. But I have to engage at the human level, and there are a significant number more than you think of people who are genetically deficient as the feminists, the feminists, the leftists, the liberals, and the medical institution refers to you. There are a lot of people who, by the metric that you think people should live by, don't deserve life. And so you gotta really think about what you're saying sometimes. Because you're saying that people like me don't deserve to be alive. And that's hard to swallow on Thanksgiving. That was a pun I didn't mean to say. But it's tough eating that I don't deserve to be alive because I spent 20 years in the service industry and it's traumatized me so badly I would rather kill myself. And I would. I would rather just sleep naked out here one night. But see, that's the thing. I think a lot of people, especially women, my good, dear friend Bobby, I think she thinks that I'm leveraging my life against you. Because I think she reads a lot of Emily Dickinson, frankly. I think she reads a lot of 19th century feminists, poets. I think she thinks that every intelligent artist, inclined personality is also the kind of person that's ransoming putting their head in an oven. I'm not allowed to talk about this on YouTube, but I'm not monetized. They haven't busted me yet. So that just means that nobody's reported me yet, which means thank you for not watching my videos. All right, guys. I've burned up 15% of my battery. That feels like an adequate share with you. You'll probably get this. Well, if I can find Wi-Fi, you'll get it today. I love you. Enjoy your Thanksgivings. I'm Shaggy. I am Phil Alitea. And you know what I say to end these.